This is not my story. It is his, told to me across a fire many winters after the world had stopped calling him a slave. The part he was willing to give me, filled in afterward by what became known once the truth of Durnholde was finally dragged into daylight. I have kept it as close to both as an old memory can hold. So this is Thrall, before he was anyone's Warchief. This is the boy who was never meant to survive his own birth. His father was Durotan, chieftain of the Frostwolf clan. His mother was Draka. Both of them died the way too many good orcs died in those years, at the hands of assassins sent by Gul'dan, the warlock who had bound our people to the demons, betrayed by one of Orgrim Doomhammer's own guards, who had sold Durotan's whereabouts for coin or favor. Thrall was an infant when it happened. He was left, by every account I ever heard, for dead beside his parents' bodies. He was found there by a human, a rising young officer of Lordaeron named Edelus Blackmore. I do not know what made Blackmore lift a dying orc infant instead of leaving him for the crows. I have heard it said he saw opportunity before he saw a child, and having met the accounts of what Blackmore did with what he found, I have no reason to doubt it. I did not know I was an orc, Thrall told me once, and I remember how strange the sentence sounded even years later, like a wound healed wrong that still occasionally throbbed. I knew I was Thrall. I did not understand for a long time that Thrall was a word before it was a name. Blackmore named him that deliberately. Thrall, a human word meaning slave, chosen to be exactly what it sounded like. Blackmore's ambition reached far past simple cruelty, though there was plenty of that too. He intended to raise the orc infant into a weapon, a champion who could one day command an army of orcs loyal to him alone. An army he could use to overthrow the Alliance and set himself up as king of whatever was left of it afterward. Thrall was not cruelty for its own sake, in other words. He was the opening move in a much larger game, though it would be a long time before the boy himself understood that. He was carried back to Durnholde Keep, Blackmore's fortress, and given to a woman named Clania Foxton to be wet-nursed alongside her own children, Blackmore's household benefiting in exchange from the improved station that came with serving the ambitious young lieutenant. It was Clania's daughter, a girl named Taretha, who mattered most in what followed. She was the one member of that household, as far as I ever heard, who came to see the orc boy as something other than an embarrassment or a tool. She gave him kindness in small, consistent doses, across years when almost no one else did. Thrall told me she was, for most of his childhood, his only consistent point of human warmth. Everyone else in that keep had a use for him. She simply liked him. She never once looked at me the way the guards did, he told me, like I was something that might go wrong. He was trained in combat by a man known to everyone at Durnholde only as Sergeant, a huge, seasoned warrior, red-haired and barrel-chested, tough with his recruits, but not without a measure of decency underneath it. On the first day of training, Sergeant would show new recruits the earring he'd worn without removing for 13 years, and issue the same standing challenge to every group. Rip it out, and you may beat me senseless afterward. Thrall told me he was the closest any recruit ever came. He knocked Sergeant to the ground in the attempt, and in the heat of it, bloodlust rising the way it did in the arena, he came within a breath of snapping the man's neck outright. He stopped himself. He never fully explained to me why, in all the times he told this part of the story. I think, listening to him, that he didn't entirely know either, only that something in him chose restraint in that instant, and that choosing it taught him something about mercy and honor that nothing else at Durnholde had been built to teach him. Sergeant seemed to understand what had passed between them. Not long after, he suggested to Blackmore that the boy be given proper military history to study, to sharpen the strategic mind Blackmore was so eager to put to use. That is, as best I know it, how Thrall came to his letters, not stolen in secret, but handed to him deliberately for reasons that had nothing to do with kindness and everything to do with what he might become. It was around this same period, training under Sergeant's eye, alongside a handful of other young recruits, that Thrall had his first encounter with another orc since he was old enough to remember anything at all. A cart of captured orcs was being moved through Durnholde on its way to the internment camps, where our people were penned after the war, and one of them, catching sight of a young orc apparently surrounded and outnumbered by armed humans, broke free of his chains to help. He shouted at Thrall in Orcish to run. Thrall understood none of it. Common was the only tongue he had ever been taught, and had no idea the orc was trying to save him rather than attack him. The guards cut the would-be rescuer down before Thrall understood what was happening at all. He told me it was the first time in his life he had properly seen one of his own people, and that the orc had died without ever knowing Thrall couldn't understand a single word he'd shouted. What he became in the years that followed was Blackmore's undefeated champion. He fought in gladiator tournaments that made his owner considerable coin with every victory, trained in every weapon Durnholde's masters could put in his hands, matched against opponents whose names I was never told, and Thrall likely never learned either. He endured, Thrall told me plainly and without much elaboration, abusive beatings both inside that ring and outside of it, whenever Blackmore judged a lesson needed reinforcing. Word of his skill traveled further than Durnholde's walls. Thrall told me that Prince Arthas Menethil himself once visited the keep, drawn by rumor of Blackmore's undefeated champion, and watched him fight from the stands like any other noble come for the spectacle. Thrall had no way of knowing, watching that visiting prince's face across the ring, that their paths would cross again years later, on a far larger field, on opposite sides of a war neither of them could yet imagine. It was in these same arena years that Taretha found her own way to keep reaching him, slipping notes hidden inside the same military history books Sergeant had first put in his hands, and he wrote back to her in turn. A quiet thread of friendship, running underneath everything Blackmore had built him to become. I asked him once what he thought about standing in that ring before a match. He said mostly nothing, that some part of him learned to go quiet and efficient the moment the fighting started, the way a hand goes numb before it goes still. I did not press him further. Some silences, I have learned, are answers in themselves. The end of his captivity came after a fight he refused to finish. He had his opponent beaten and could have ended it outright, the way Blackmore always expected of him. But something in him held back, the same restraint that had first surfaced with Sergeant's earring years before, and he let the final round go undecided rather than deliver the killing blow the crowd was baying for. Blackmore did not see mercy in it. He saw a slave costing him money in front of paying lords, and the beating he gave Thrall afterward was worse than anything that had come before. It was in the aftermath of that beating that Taretha acted at real risk to herself. She created a diversion inside the keep that let him slip from his cell unnoticed, and met him outside the fortress walls near a cave, where she had provisions and supplies waiting. "Go," she told him. I do not know her exact words. No one recorded them, and Thrall himself, telling it to me, never claimed to remember them precisely either. But I know the shape of what passed between them, because I know what came after. He left Durnholde that night, hoping, as he put it to me, never to return. I will stop the telling there because that is where his own accounting of this part of his life always stopped too. What came next, his recapture, the internment camps, Grom Hellscream, Orgrim Doomhammer, the long road to becoming Warchief, belongs to other fires, other nights. This part of the story is smaller than the songs that came after it, and I think that is exactly why it deserves to be kept intact on its own. Not the beginning of a legend, but a boy who was raised to be a weapon, taught mercy almost by accident, and chose, the one night it mattered most, to walk toward whatever freedom looked like rather than stay and become everything he'd been built for. He never told me this part with any pride in his voice. If anything, he told it quietly, almost apologetically, as though the boy he was describing felt like a stranger to him by the time he was telling it to me. I think that is probably true of most of us when we're honest about who we were before whatever finally set us free. I keep this part of his story separately from everything he became afterward, because I think it is the part most likely to be forgotten under the weight of the rest, and because I think he would have wanted at least one person to remember it exactly as it happened, not smoothed into something cleaner by the years.